This is a Global Order interview. I am delighted today to welcome onto this interview Andrew Jenkin. Andrew Jenkin has 30 years of experience in a very specialized field of critical minerals. He's one of the most important researchers on minerals in Australia, and he's also the research director, let me get the name right, of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, which is Australia's premier research organization looking into these matters. Ms. Jenkin, who's joined me for this interview, has also been to India very recently to try and understand how these two great Indo-Pacific democracies can cooperate with each other in this most important area. I want to begin by asking you, Andrew, tell us a little bit about critical minerals and Australia-India cooperation in that area. India is trying to transition to a green economy. A large part of that is transitioning its entire mobility to green technology, to EVs, electric vehicles. That can't be done without critical minerals. And Australia is the home of some of the biggest reserves of critical minerals, including lithium. How do you see this collaboration?
Yeah, thanks. Lovely to meet, and thanks for the question. It's a very topical area globally, but just between our two nations, it's a tremendous opportunity, really, as you've identified. I mean, it is a little simplistically to just talk in terms of supply and demand, but I mean they're kind of the big anchors, really, for the two nations, as you said. And I was fortunate enough to visit India 4 or 6 weeks ago, and you mentioned the electrification drive in India, and we were fortunate to visit the Ola future factory building the electric vehicle two-wheelers not far from Bengaluru, and that was amazing to see that factory. And it's really evident to me that India are really planting the foot on the accelerator in this area. And of course the world is trying to do the same, but just by the sheer volume of demand in India, it is going to present challenges in terms of the sourcing of these new raw materials, many of which are pretty modest size markets at the moment. So they have, quite incredible predicted growth rates, growth rates that are incredibly uncommon for minerals. So that's the challenge, is to matching the supply with the demand. And as you identified, Australia is very fortunate geologically and has a very well-developed mineral industry, and is well established in terms of being able to supply reliably around the world. But the challenge for us equally is to accelerate that at rates that we haven't seen before in many other areas. Maybe you sort of got to hark back to some of the big investments in the Pilbara in the 1960s when that opened up. Maybe the bauxite off Weipa not long after as well, to look for comparable sort of growth from not a lot to a lot very quickly. So I see great potential there. I was really encouraged by what I saw at India, not just the demand story. It was more about the intent of the government and the industrial players, whether they're publicly owned or privately owned, to really move the dial. They recognise that this demand is not going to wait, so they have to get urgent and get busy. And it was all very positive. As you said, I work for what we call CSIRO. It's the National Science Agency here, and we have a very big minerals industry research group, which I'm lucky enough to be a part of. And everywhere we went in India, it was sort of open door, and what can we do together. It was really constructive conversations, both at the end user level, in terms of your minerals industry as well, and also the R&D providers. We were fortunate enough to visit 2 CSIR laboratories and have meetings with IITs as well. So I think the future between the two nations is really strong. As you say, liberal democracies. We both love cricket. Had to get that in there, of course. But there's this feeling, I think, that the time is right in terms of the nations really stepping up their relationship, and I think the minerals industry in Australia is is well placed in that regard.
I want to ask you, a lot of people ask the question that in this entire transition to electric vehicles and so on and so forth, is there enough supply? Because some people worry, is there enough supply of these minerals? We want to all transition away from fossil fuels, but what if there isn't enough minerals, so to speak, to make this transition effectively around the world? Is that a valid fear, Andrew, or is that, something that people just worry about unnecessarily?
Well, I think it's almost a valid fear. I mean, there's plenty of minerals. It's a big planet, and there's lots of underexplored areas. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of minerals. It's more, I think the valid concern is, can we find them and develop them responsibly,
and can we mine them sustainably?
Correct. Yeah, and as quickly as we want to transition, as quickly as we need. We've all seen that the forecasts and countries' desires to decarbonize as quickly as possible, and the sourcing of the minerals to do that. As you mentioned, the lithium and the nickel, the battery minerals, the solar cell minerals. We're going to need to develop a lot of new mines and expand a lot of new mines and build processing plants. And traditionally, it takes quite a bit of time, to get permits, to achieve, all licenses, whether they're, government documented license or social licenses with impacted stakeholders or communities as well. So I think the real challenge is to do it well and do it fast. And I think that will challenge a lot of countries and a lot of companies as well, because in our industry, it's big investments. So there's caution a lot of the time, and it's appropriate caution to make sure that the resource is real, that it can be developed, that it'll be developed sustainably, as you say. But there is a lot of good work going into this area, and I think there's quite a lot of momentum and aligned momentum in terms of doing it well, doing it for the right reasons. So I'm hopeful, but every time I see these predictions of demand, it does make me sort of step back and think, crikey, I hope there's a lot of project development work going on and a lot of stakeholder engagement going on, a lot of exploration going on to match. But the minerals are there. Don't doubt that. The minerals are there, okay?
All right, wonderful. That's good news. The minerals are there. It just has to be accessed sustainably. Before we move on from critical minerals, I have one last question on critical minerals. You mentioned investments, right? India obviously needs a lot of these critical minerals, not only for EVs, which I mentioned, electric vehicles, but also India is now one of the biggest manufacturers of mobile phones. Many critical mineral elements go into the making of mobile phones also. Many people don't realize this, but it's, all the mobile phones we throw away so easily, a lot of stuff goes in there too. So do you see in the nurturing and in the investments that the exploration of these minerals require in Australia, do you see Indian investments coming in? Is that the kind of, cooperation and partnership the two countries are looking to build?
Look, it's a little bit out of my area because I'm a research director, not an investment person directly. But I think the answer is pretty plainly, yes. There's investment flows between countries all the time, but that all comes down to the appetite and the acceptance in terms of cross-border trade. But what I hear, which is sort of on the edge, as I say, it's not my core area. The sense I get is that there's genuine appetite for that because the countries are quite aligned in so many ways. I mean, the other thing I'd point out, I guess, is that India has, and it's totally understandable, an appetite to try and build from within and utilize your own resources. That's totally understandable, and you've got a very vibrant minerals industry as well, particularly iron ore and coal. Aluminium, but the critical minerals is less developed there. I know there's a lot of work going on with the geological survey in particular, and there's sure to be critical minerals in India as well, but it's a small industry at the moment. So I expect there will be cross-border investments, and one of the key things from an Australian perspective is, historically we've largely been a mining country, and we've sent modestly processed materials overseas for further processing, and it's an aspiration of the country to selectively move downstream and to try and value add some of our minerals, particularly in the in the critical minerals areas, the ones where you do move into chemicals, battery chemicals, these sorts of areas. And I think there'll be some interesting discussions between the two nations and companies as to where a logical point would be that you have a finished product in one country and you move it to the other. But I hear those conversations going on there. It sounds like it's a pretty maturely handled topic.
All right, let's jump into another area of great cooperation between Australia and India, which of course is decarbonisation of iron and steel. Now, that's an area where India and Australia have a green steel partnership. I'm wondering whether you could throw some more light on what this green steel partnership could look like, how this decarbonisation process would happen, what are the timelines, and why this is such an exciting venture.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I was remiss, I forgot to mention that we also have a critical minerals research partnership as well. So that we have two partnerships that are both being managed, by people in my program. The Australian government has set aside some funding for work in both critical minerals and in green steel for the mutual benefit of both nations. So thanks for that lead in. The Green Steel Partnership, in fact, both partnerships will be starting in earnest next year, but we were, in India to have as a preliminary fact-finding mission. We met with quite a few iron ore producers and steel producers in India. Look, we're the largest iron ore producer in the world. India is the second largest steel producer in the world and the fastest growing at the moment. And so there's another good match there from that regard. And I think both nations, recognise that decarbonisation needs to occur here. It's the single largest mineral and metal production value chain from a CO2 emission perspective. Depending on who you read, it's about 8% of global emissions. So there's a big opportunity there and a big challenge. It's technically very challenging, but the good news is that it's recognised. There's several people working on it around the world, including ourselves, and the appetite from India to discuss the topic and to work together on it was really strong. There's a lot of good work already happening. We had some fantastic meetings with Tata Steel, with NMDC, with OMC, and some of your research groups, the CSIRO laboratories, NML and IMMT as well. So there's good work that's commenced and a lot of goodwill. So these partnerships that we have are effectively 3.5 years in duration. So there's time there for us to work together. But these are going to be really decadal challenges. The blast furnace is the workhorse of the iron and steel industry. It's very large capital investment. They won't be turned off rapidly, but new technologies are coming, and there's a lot of work being done on the existing blast furnace technologies to try and reduce their emissions as well. So it's going to require a lot of innovation, a lot of research and development, but as I said, both nations have recognised it, that they stand to gain a lot by getting active in the area and also by collaborating together on this topic.
I want to end this wonderful conversation, Andrew, by asking you, India and Australia, this partnership is seeing new heights these days. We consistently hear that, new partnerships are coming up, new ideas are coming up, new collaborations are coming up. And as the Indo-Pacific, as the world's attention moves deeper and deeper into the Indo-Pacific, India and Australia are becoming, in a sense, two major pivots of this entire region. Now, technological development is one of the foundational pillars because the world is shifting towards a new kind of technological era. I wonder, in your field, which is a critical field for the development of these new technologies, what are the innovations that you're seeing, not just in Australia and India? Maybe you could begin with Australia and India, but also in other parts of the world, which are really exciting you. But specifically in India and Australia, what are the innovations? What are the innovative ways of thinking that are exciting you as a researcher?
Yeah, there's a lot's going on. I'll start with a couple in our backyard. We've got two hydrometallurgical processes that we're very excited about. One that looks to unlock titanium and vanadium, and also the iron that it's generally associated with. And we have another process that we're looking at, which does a similar job with nickel and cobalt. We've proven these up in the laboratory, and we've introduced them to potential Indian partners as well. So there's two technologies there that require scale up for sure, but they're exciting because they're targeting really important critical minerals. But why I really like them is that they utilize almost all of the material. So we're very much pushing towards zero waste, or very, very low levels of waste, whereas historically the minerals industry has focused on the primary target element and then just sort of pushed the rest to the side and left it, for another day or to be managed. So very excited by those technologies. Some others around reusing waste as well. So we've got quite a bit of work going on in evaluating the tailings dams that are around the world for the critical minerals that they could contain. So, and they're a great place to look, right? Because they're already sitting there. They've already been mined. They've had quite a lot of processing, done to them. They're in a disturbed area, a permitted area already. So why open up a new mine if you've already got a resource there that's already been mined? In the green steel area, I'm quite encouraged by some of the thinking around capturing some of the CO2 off blast furnaces and potentially converting that into something valuable. So CCU, and that's something we've spoken about with Indian companies. And I started my career in the aluminium industry, so I know quite a bit about that. And the one I want to call out there is being worked on by a joint venture called Elysis in Canada, who are trying to commercialize inert anode technology. So the aluminium industry is another big emitter of CO2, but there's some fantastic work being done by the partners there in Canada, and if they can prove that technology and commercialize it around the world, that'll be a really big help for that industry. So there's excitement in certain areas, but innovation is very difficult. Quite often it's two steps forward, one back. Sometimes you hit a dead end. We need to accept that, but we need to be really working on the big things that matter, and that CSIRO is all about. We're trying to really work on the big challenges and really swing for the fence on some game-changing technologies. And we're really hopeful that with the Australian federal government's support, with these two partnerships, and with such great appetite from potential Indian partners that we met, that we'll be able to really work together and actually move the dial on both the supply of critical minerals and the decarbonisation of mineral and metal production.
Wonderful. That's a very optimistic note on which we should end this interview. But I love that expression, swing from the fence. It does seem like Australia and India are swinging from the fence in their partnership and relationship these days. Thank you, Andrew Jenkin, a veteran mineral expert, researcher, and research director at CSIRO in Australia. Thank you for joining me. I'm Hindol Sengupta. This is a Global Order interview. Thanks very much for your time. And I hope you'll continue to join us in the future for more interviews on the wonderful Australia-India relationship. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Hindol. Pleasure.